Well, we've got some key players to watch in this 2025 edition of the third Saturday in October. And, besides Aguilar, for those who've not been watching the Tennessee Volunteers, gentlemen, who are the guys that we need to look out for?
Ooh, there's a handful that you need to look out for that I'll say. It's all relatively discovered at this point on the offensive end. I'd have to say with Deshaun Bishop at running back, and he does plan on playing. Chris Brazel is one to look out for if he gets going. He didn't do much last game, as we already mentioned. But you look at some of the other guys too. Mike Matthews and Braylon Staley are both very capable of making big plays. So those are two guys that I'd mention. If you haven't seen them make or have productive outings, Staley had one last week. He had 6 catches for 109 yards. He's a receiver from South Carolina. And you know what happened the last time a receiver from South Carolina went against Alabama? He caught 6 catches, went for 207 yards and 5 touchdowns. So we like our South Carolina wide receivers in Tennessee. On the defensive end, there's a handful of guys to watch for, edge rushers in particular. One that I'll say that is beginning to emerge on this team is Jordan Ross. Somebody posted it. I think James Foster on X posted it earlier today, but this dude's highlight tape is explosive. We've seen it in both the Georgia and Arkansas games for Tennessee this year, and he may be the next best undiscovered talent by the rest of the league. So that's a guy that I would have my eyes on for Alabama. I would obviously keep an eye on a lot of the front seven as well, too, just because we know they can be explosive.
Yeah, I mean, Ross, like he's a guy that I was waiting to step up for a while because he was a 5-star guy, and he's probably best known for running into the punter in the Arkansas game last year. And
he's redeemed himself, Jordan.
Oh, yeah, he definitely did. I mean, against Arkansas last week, he led the team in sacks with 1.5. So, I mean, that was his first big breakout game of the year. But I'll give you another defensive lineman that's starting to break out too, and that's Caleb Herring, another guy that's been in the system for a little bit that's starting to show a little bit more promise as well. But if you're talking about like the number one defensive lineman I would worry about if I was Alabama, it would be Josh Josephs, who I think was preseason All SEC before the season. I could be wrong, but I mean, he's a guy that's been on Tennessee's roster for a while that was always showing glimpses, but he was just overshadowed by James Pierce more than anything. But now he's finally like the guy on the defensive line, so he's a guy to look out for. And Tucker already knows my boy Colton Hood. I think that this could be a good game for him to prove himself. I mean, when he was at Colorado, I think that he wasn't looked at as much as I think people should have. He was 13th in the country in interception return yards as a backup, and with only I think he had 2 picks. And if you just looked at his tape then, he looked like he was going to be a good player. And so far for Tennessee, he's probably been the best defensive back on the team this year. And then like an offense, I mean, Tucker's already brought up Brazel. He might be trying to replicate what Jalen Hyatt did a couple of years ago. I know that's what a lot of Vols fans would hope for, and I've seen some stuff online about that. But yeah, I think like just the tandem of running backs as well, Star Thomas and Deshaun Bishop, like Star Thomas, exceptional at catching the pass and getting you like good 10 yards here and there, more of a situational back. But Deshaun Bishop had a huge breakout game. And as long as he's healthy, because he did go down at one point in the game, but Josh Heupel's hinting that he's going to be playing this Saturday. If Deshaun Bishop can get going, then that could be the difference in the game.
Key players to watch for, Brody.
Well, obviously you got to start with the trio of wide receivers that Alabama has. That group is combined to record over 1,000 receiving yards, 12 touchdowns. I think that unit is very solid. Obviously the past few weeks kind of seen a lack of production from Ryan Williams. Maybe this will be the game that he, picks things up. But Horton and Bernard have been consistent all year long. I also look at a guy like Kevin Riley, especially with Jam Miller questionable. Don't know if he's going to play. Kevin Riley's going to have to pick up some of that slack, and he's good out of the backfield. He has 100-plus receiving yards. He's a good runner too. And then another guy that I got my eyes on at running back to add some bit of juice, a bit of depth is Daniel Hill. Hadn't got many opportunities this year. I look for him to get several opportunities this weekend. Defensively, I think the key players are Jan Zapier and LT Overton. I think that they're going to have to be disruptive and cause a lot of pressure on Joey Aguilar and get him out of his comfort zone. I feel like those two players are key. And then obviously Justin Jefferson and Deontay Lawson at inside linebacker, especially Justin Jefferson's been playing extremely well. I know
Man, he's been moving on up and finally getting a piece of that pie.
Yeah, man. Like you said, he got that additional year. He seems to be taking full advantage of it. He's got 20 tackles in the last 2 games combined. But I look for those guys to be key players in this weekend's matchup for sure.
No doubt. I mean, like LT Overton, I mean, he played a huge part in Alabama's victory over Missouri. And
Yep.
Justin Jefferson at that 7-minute, 30-second mark on 3rd and 11 against Missouri, like boom. I mean, there's one guy I'm really thinking about, and that's Dijon Lee.
Yep.
I am so thinking about this guy. If nobody knew his name before last Saturday, well, you know him now because he was clutch.
Yeah. Like you said, he's finally starting to get more opportunities and defense coordinator Kane Womack said that he could see him basically said that he could potentially see him being a starter before the season's over. But a guy that's 6'3", 6'4", was a 5-star coming out of high school. Definitely got some opportunities last week. I expect that to be the case, for him to get even more opportunities this weekend against Tennessee.
Oh, man. There's one guy on that list that has not been mentioned. Latsier Brooks.
Yep.
Man, I would hate to be on his bad side because he'll chew you up like a chicken nugget.
Ladzier Brooks, he's one of those guys that's kind of similar to Jalen Waddle. A guy that can play the slot. He's very fit. He might be little in stature, but he's physical, very fast. He's a big play waiting to happen. And that catch on 4th down in the Missouri game was a huge moment. The big one of the biggest catches of the year. So he's made several key catches, and then obviously with whatever's happening with Ryan Williams in terms of the injury and lack of production, you could look at a guy like Ladzier Brooks to step up and play the slot and get more opportunities. So I could definitely see him having a big game this weekend too.
Ooh. Another one on defense is Bray Hubbard. He's going to have some more big games before we know it.
Yeah, Bray Hubbard, he struggled in week 1. Everybody was attacking him on social media kind of, and rightfully so. But Bray Hubbard's a guy that's finally got his opportunity to shine this year and is taking full advantage of it. You kind of saw a glimpse of that last year, but he's picked things up this year where he left off last year, and he's a leader on that defense, and he's going to be tested over the top. Like they said, you got Chris Brazzell, you got Braylon Staley and Mike Matthews. So they're going to present some challenges. Miles Kitselman as well. So I think that the Bray Hubbard and the rest of that Alabama secondary is definitely going to be put to the test.
Well, and before we move on to the next topic, I wonder who that X factor from Tennessee is.
Well, you would think Joey Aguilar is going to have to be mentioned in that conversation. But can somebody step up and on that defensive end too? And Colton Hood is one that Jordan mentioned already. He's had some big plays for Tennessee this year. Making big plays in the secondary, scoop and score in the first game of the season against Syracuse. You had one in that Mississippi State game, a pick 6 as well. So there's a couple guys that you can throw around in there. In the passing game, it's hard to say who exactly that could be because it feels like it could be a different person each game. Obviously, Brazel has been the go-to guy at wide receiver for most of the season. Arkansas did a very good job of taking him away in this game, but Staley and Kitzelman picked up the slack. So if Bama really is trying to limit his touches, then I would say one of those two guys could be in that discussion as well. So those two, and then maybe if Tennessee gets somebody to step up at linebacker potentially, shut some things down, limit some yardage that Bama gains on, say, screens or wheel routes out of the backfield. Whether that be Arion Carter, Jeremiah T-Later. Arion Carter had a career game at Mississippi State with tackles. He had like 17 in that game for Tennessee. So that's a guy that I would be watching out for if I'm Alabama, because linebackers, Tennessee has been plagued by slow linebacker play for the better part of 15 years now. But Arion Carter, that's a dude that watched Al Wilson highlights when he was in high school, when he was committed to Tennessee. So be looking out for him.
Yeah, like you said with like Arion Carter, I mean, he's honestly, I mean, the linebacker core might be the weakest position group on Tennessee, if we're being honest. I mean, but Arion Carter, like you said, he stepped up big time against Mississippi State. He did have 17 tackles in that game. He's definitely going to be a guy to keep an eye on. But I mean, if he was to go down, then Tennessee would have some serious issues, especially with how well, like, at least from the little bits that I've seen of Ty Simpson, I mean, he can throw it down the middle of the field with ease, and that could be an issue if like Carter was to go down. But another defensive player, I mean, I feel like we've mentioned most of them. I mean, because a lot of them come from the defensive line. I mean, you could see someone like Ty Redmond step up. I'm pretty sure he had a decent game against Syracuse, if I'm not mistaken. But he's also a freshman too, so I would imagine that Alabama is going to be targeting him a lot. That's going to be something that he's going to get his reps in during this game, that's for sure. But offensively speaking, I mean, can I just count five guys as one? Because the offensive line unit has been, I've been saying it every week, and it's because I don't think I've seen this good of a Tennessee defensive line since they had five starters end up going to play in the NFL under Derek Dooley. And even then, Tennessee was god awful during that time. But I mean, they put people in the league. But Tennessee's offensive line right now has been playing exceptionally well. And like Tucker said, like even with injuries and everything like that too, I mean, it's just amazing how they've been able to step up so far. I mean, Tennessee's tied for number 8 right now in sacks allowed, and they are number 2 in the country in tackles for a loss allowed. And if you go look at the box scores at the end of each one of these games, Tennessee might give up like 2 tackles for a loss at most, and maybe a sack, if that. I mean, that's how well the offensive line's been performing this year. And I think the offensive line might be the biggest key for Tennessee, especially if they can get the ball moving on the ground, which will be important, like I mentioned earlier.
It's going to be a wild ride on Saturday for sure, seeing what's going to be happening.